In this video, we'll continue to talk about Barbara Ehrenreich's novel, Barbara Ehrenreich's case study, Nickel and Dimed. We are continuing talking about the evaluation. The last video was about the evaluation as well, and we talked about why, for example, low-wage workers don't act as rational agents in a free market society, because the free market society isn't very free, and the company imposes certain practices against workers that prevent them from seeking new jobs if they don't like the job they currently have by imposing artificial and incredibly absurd standards. In this video, I wanted to ask and answer a few questions that are brought up in Barbara Ehrenreich's evaluation chapter. On page 212 and 213, for example, let me ask and answer the following question. What does the author find problematic about where America places its priorities? And I quote from Barbara Ehrenreich. She says, America is, quote, cutting public services for the poor while investing even more heavily in prisons and cops. Right? That's where America places its priorities. Instead of investing in our young people's education, instead of making sure that young people obtain healthy food and have an environment in which to study and learn, an environment in which studying and learning is possible, instead of having school districts poor school districts that invest heavily in education. We have some school districts that have so much money, more money than they know what to do with, so they have all these recreational centers and pools. Or we have these other school districts, they can't even afford textbooks for their students. I recommend you read John Kozel's Savage Inequalities if you want information on that subject. But again, we have this two-class society. It exists. It's real. If you don't want to acknowledge it, you're naive. That's the way our society functions. And as George Carlin would say, we live in an American society in which education sucks because that's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to suck. The corporate management wants it to suck because you're not supposed to be educated. They don't want a lot of people educated. They don't want critical thinking, critical reasoning people who can assess the reality around them and say that they're being, and Carlin would say the word effed. They just want people smart enough to handle the machinery in the factory, smart enough to engage in the secretarial jobs, smart enough if they're working for an insurance company to trying to deny people their claims. They don't want people smart enough to recognize how much their life sucks, how much of a Huxley's Brave New World is being created, how many people are on antidepressants and why they're on antidepressants, maybe because their lives suck, because of the jobs that they work. And they just want people smart enough to engage in the stupid jobs that they're given and to shut up and work the jobs that they have. On page 213, Ehrenreich notes, I quote, the majority of American workers, about 60%, earn less than $14 an hour. And I would say that $14 an hour is barely a living wage in 1999. You might be a living wage, but it's barely a living wage, and 60% of the American workforce is making that wage. Making that wage or lower. You can't support your family on that kind of money. And of course, we spent all this money in foreign wars, as Dennis Kucinich will note, but we don't care about our home. We don't care about providing for our people. So Barbara Ehrenreich believes a two-class society is being created in America. And so let me quote Ehrenreich and what she says when she means that, right? And I quote, as public schools and other public services deteriorate, those who can afford to do so send their children to private schools and spend their off hours in private spaces. These are health clubs, for example, instead of the local park. They don't ride on public buses and subways. They withdraw from mixed neighborhoods into distant suburbs. They live in gated communities or guarded apartment towers. They stop in shores that, in line with the prevailing so-called market segregation, are designed to appeal to the affluent alone. Even the affluent young are increasingly unlikely to spend their summers learning how the so-called other half lives, as lifeguards, waitresses, or housekeepers at resort hotels. The New York Times reports that they now prefer career-relevant activities like summer schools or interning in an appropriate professional setting to the so-called sweaty low-pay and mind-numbing slots that have long been their lot. End quote. And that's from a New York Times article on June 18, 2000, entitled Summer Work is Out of Favor with the Young. So Barbara's saying essentially that the upper class, they don't understand how the lower class lives. They're disassociated from the poor. They think that the poor are all drug addicts, or the poor are all these horrible people with major psychological problems. Which, of course, if they do have psychological problems, it's probably a result of the alienating jobs they have. But it's basically like there's a TV show in America. I don't really watch it, but I think it was Undercover Boss, about these employers going and working the jobs of their employees and finding how hard their employees really work and how much they're undervalued. I don't completely buy the premise of the show Undercover Boss from what I even know about it, but I would say that Undercover Boss, if anything, is a very mild portrayal of what really occurs in America between the haves and the have-nots. On page 219 again, the author, right, Barbara, tries to break the myth, a certain myth about poor people and jobs. And the myth she tries to break is this idea that poor people with jobs will have money. money enough not to be homeless, or money enough to purchase necessary food items and food items that are healthy. Page 219, she notes, and I quote, according to a survey conducted by the U.S. Conference of Mayors, 67% of the adults requesting emergency food aid are people with jobs. 67% of the adults requesting emergency food aid are people with jobs. That's from Deborah Left, right, quoted in the National Journal, in the hunger persists in the U.S. despite the good times, in the Detroit News, June 15, 2000. And so I would note from that, again, many homeless people, they have jobs. Of course, people like Goldberg, and of course this man right here, Irving Kristol, would write that those who are homeless either have mental disorders or they're on drugs. I say bullshit to that, it's not true. What does the author, the final question in this chapter is, what does the author write about in terms of the poor people functioning in U.S. society relative to the wealthy? And I would say this: the poor people are in fact the major philanthropists of society. This is what Article Wright writes. 221. The poor people are the major. They are the working poor, as they are approvingly termed, are in fact the major philanthropists in our society. They neglect their own children so that the children of others will be cared for. They live in substandard housing so that other homes will be shiny and perfect. They endure privation so that the inflation will be low and stock prices high. So essentially, the working poor work very diligently, not for their own benefit, but for the benefit of the wealthy, for the benefit of the elites, for the benefit of those people who are the haves in society rather than the have-nots. The wealthy, they benefit from the labor of the poor, and they didn't receive an adequate education such that they understand, in fact, how much their lives suck and why their lives suck. Well, in my last video, I just want to talk about the afterword of Nickel and Dimed, the afterword in this edition of Nickel and Dimed. Thank you for watching, and I hope these videos have been informative to you and have taught you something about Barbara Ehrenreich's work, Nickel and Dimed.